Do we have another politician in the audience? I'm told no? Good afternoon again. And I will be talking about Ngugi, the political Ngugi, not so much Ngugi, the fictional writer that many of you know. In 2002, I moved to New York hoping to reconnect with Ngugi, whom we have had a relationship when he was based in London, who was then teaching at the New York University. Unfortunately, shortly after my arrival, he relocated to the University of California, Irvine, where the warmer California climate was better suited to his health. However, as luck would have, he returned frequently to New York for literary engagements and speaking opportunities. And one such event was the 2005 Penn World Voices Festival at the New York University, where he was the keynote speaker. The event was held at the New York Washington Square campus in Greenwich Village in Manhattan, which was just a short walk from my home. We left about an hour earlier, only to find a long queue snaking around the building. When we inquired, we were told the crowd was there for Ngugi's talk. It was clear for me and my partner who were there at that time that we weren't going to get tickets for that show. But as fate would have it, we happened to run into Ngugi at the entrance. He was dressed in a green jacket with a hood, and beneath it, he wore a colorless African kitenge shirt. And I think this was his trademark. He looked somehow scruffy. Of course, the ushers did not recognize him, although he was previously a professor at that particular institution. But Ngugi was not bothered, displaying a great humility and a down-to-earth demeanor. He was approached eventually by the university officials who directed him to another entrance at the opposite side of the same building. He then asked us to follow him to the VIP entrance, and we were admitted as part of his entourage. Although there were other speakers on that day, I have seen Ngugi speak in Nairobi, London, Johannesburg, and now in New York. Audiences always responded enthusiastically to his fresh and original ideas. His presentation and speeches are consistently well received and often end in applause and standing ovations. So I've started with that story to illustrate the humbleness and the warmth of Ngugi as a person. And that's the Ngugi I know and we have come together to celebrate today. Just before I got here to speak, I was humbled to see people from the Kamukunji Center, the original actors who played in the Gahika Ndenda play in the 70s. And I'm not so young and I can remember the play at that time. The significant thing was that Ngugi had taken that play to the peasants of Limuru, which was a revolutionary and game-changing moment in the theater and performance history of our country. We're therefore witnessed here today in the presence of history to see the original actors of the play. So Ngugi was indeed a people's playwright who left the halls of the elite of the University of Nairobi to educate and conscientize the people in the villages of our country. And he was able to empower people to speak for themselves in their language. And he planted the first seeds of freedom and liberation among the people of Limuru. Ngugi was undoubtedly a colossal figure and a seminal force in both African global literature and African politics. He was a leading political, social, cultural, and intellectual thinker of our times. a journalist, a novelist, a playwright, a professor, philosopher, and above all, for me, a revolutionary icon, an intellectual thinker, and a political activist. His original theoretical interventions have shaped and influenced the global community on critical issues such as culture, language, identity, and decolonization. Indeed, he is one of the leading lights and a major figure in the theories of decolonization and decoloniality. The depth and the breadth of his contribution to the cultural, social, and political emancipation, as well as the humanization of the Kenyan and the African society at large, are unparalleled in modern African history. His life has been inextricably linked to our political and cultural struggles, both on the continent and beyond. Ngugi is of course better known for his seminal fiction, but I have known him as a revolutionary and political actor who has dedicated his life to the liberation of Kenya and the realization of a truly independent and prosperous nation, free from the shackles of imperialism and new colonialism. As a revolutionary thinker and activist, Ngugi has effectively used the pen as a powerful weapon of resistance against imperialism, oppression, and injustice, as well as a tool for decolonization and liberation. He gave a name, a face, a voice, an alternative narrative to Kenya's toiling masses, the peasantry, and the proletariat. He always stood with the dispossessed, the oppressed, the exploited, and the downtrodden, the wretched of the earth, and has brilliantly articulated their struggles, dreams, and aspirations, contributing significantly to the struggle for fundamental change. All his writings, speeches, and activism directly challenge the foundations of the Kenyan new colonial state and envision a different Kenya, a different Africa, and a more just and equitable global system. He rejected the colonial and racist notion that Africans were inherently inferior or limited in their abilities and should remain hewers of wood, drawers of water for the Western world and capitalism. Ngugi's radical vision empowered us to believe that another Kenya, another Africa, and another world are both possible and worth fighting for. Ngugi, though, was not just a critique of the system, but an active freedom fighter who led from the front in the struggles for change. He's been ideologically an ideological bedrock and a guiding light of the Kenyan left movement, as well as a towering internationalist who has written, spoken, and organized against inequality and injustice, not only in Kenya and Africa, but across the globe. I first met Ngugi personally and started working with him politically some 43 years ago this month in June 1982, when he left Kenya for London. This marked the beginning of the extended exile, which sadly ended with his passing on the 28th May 2025 in the USA. I had the singular honor and privilege of knowing and working with Ngugi, not in the sterile confines of academia, but in the real world of politics and activism. He profoundly influenced my political development, shaped my thinking and worldview. London may have many meanings, been the metropolis of the British Empire and the symbol of colonialism. But in the 1980s, it served a different purpose for us. It was a vibrant multinational hub of culture, social activism, and politics that brought together Africans and people of African descent from the Caribbean. And London was then the hotbed of radicalism, a sanctuary for left-wing activists, academics, writers, students, and exiles from Africa and beyond. So it was an exciting time and place to be, a center of political activism and a political school for those fleeing repression and persecution. Many committed white Britons also campaigned for change within the UK and supported struggles for freedom across Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean, providing a political home for many of us who have fled persecution in our own countries. It was also a time of rising political consciousness among the sizable Caribbean community, fighting against racism and for social justice, equity, and inclusion. They worked closely with the large Asian community under the umbrella of the Black resistance and activism. The politics of Black Britain were energized by the struggles in South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Namibia at that time, as the people there fought to liberate themselves from centuries-old colonial rule, as well as those resisting oppression in African countries. On a national level, intensified Black British political activism in the UK yielded notable results, with the election of the first wave of articulate young Black MPs, including Diane Abbott, Barney Grant, Paul Bartang, and Keith Vass at the time when we had just arrived in Britain. For the first time, a new Black politics was emerging, and Black people were increasingly visible in mainstream British politics. Ngugi had left Kenya and had come fresh from the front line of our struggle for change. Apart from producing groundbreaking plays such as Gahikan Denda and the Trial of Dedan Kimathi, establishing the Kamiridhu Community Center, and getting incarcerated by the Kenyan state, which feared the political conscientization of the Kenyan peasantry, he also played a pivotal role in the establishment of underground progressive organization like the December 12 movement, which would be articulated by other speakers. He was also bringing his vast experience to bear on our nascent diaspora political group in London and in the neighboring European countries. As soon as Ngugi arrived, we quickly organized ourselves into a solidarity group called the Committee for the Release of Political Prisoners, initiated by Wanjiru Kwihoro in June 1982. It was formally launched on the 2nd of July 1982 with John LaRose, founder and publisher of the New Beacon books, as the chair. The committee responded to the political escalating repression and the human rights abuses by the Kenyan government. Founding members of the committee included Ngugi, Wanjiru, Wanyiri Kihoro, Abdulatif Abdallah, Wangoi Wagoro, and Nish Matenjwa. And later we were joined by Sumbi Lango and Dan Thea. Shadra Guto also participated in the formative stages before moving to teach at the University of Zimbabwe. The committee enjoyed support from prominent figures, historical figures in the British Black movement, including Darcus Howe, who was the editor of Race Today, the poet Linton Kwesi Johnson, the veteran academic, writer, and revolutionary figure C.L.R. James, the parliamentarians Jeremy Corbyn and Harry Cohen, Sarah White, Patricia Howard, Anne Wormsley, Leila Hassan, and Margaret Busby among them. These were some of our solidarity supporters and important in our history of resistance. We campaigned for the release of many political prisoners, including Raila Odinga, George Anyona, Koigi wa Wamwere, Edward Oyugi, Alamin Mazrui, Kamau Kuria, Maina wa Kinyati, Kamoji Washira, Mukaru Nganga, and hundreds of other political activists who were languishing in Moi's jails. Incidentally, at that time, our sister Martha Karua was an active lawyer, and she happened to be the lawyer of Raila Odinga and some of these people whom we were supporting. And they were fighting on the same front, but to my surprise, when I returned from exile, I found that there are parts of many of these activists and the strugglers in the liberation of our country had gone to different political movement and formations. One of the most significant developments during our exile time in London was the formation of Ukenya in 1986. Until then, we operated under the umbrella of the Committee for the Release of Political Prisoners, which united Kenyans and internationalists supporting our struggle against the new colonial Kenyan regime. The formation of Ukenya was a milestone in the sense that this was the first publicly organization to challenge the political legitimacy and to throw the gauntlet to the Moi regime since the banning of the Kenya People's Union, KPU, in the 1960s. There were many underground organizations, but for all intent and purposes, we were one of the first organizations to come out publicly. As repression inside Kenya intensified, it became clear we could no longer remain passive. We needed to act and stand with the Kenyan people. And on the 18th of February 1986, the 30th anniversary of Dedan Kimathi's hanging, we launched this new movement at Friends House in Euston in London with revolutionary songs, poems, and speeches. This organization was called Umoja wa Kupigania Demokrasia Kenya, Ukenya. Ngugi was pivotal in realizing this movement, in the realization of this movement. As chair of this new organization, I delivered the keynote speech titled From Mau Mau to Mwakenya, linking the two struggles of the Kenyan people, outlining our program and demands for change. We adopted a clear ideological platform grounded in evidence-based research, producing reports exposing the atrocities of the Moi regime, the arbitrary arrests, torture, state-sponsored vigilante violence, political repression. We documented and named victims, revealing the regime's brutality and corruption, and challenged its propaganda and disinformation. Our organization mobilized UK's public opinion, making it increasingly difficult for the Moi regime and his operatives to operate freely, especially as he often visited London. We protested his visits, once organizing a demonstration outside Queen Elizabeth Centre near the House of Commons in Westminster, where he was scheduled to speak. However, he was no show. It was a cold, windy, and rainy day in London. Needless to say that we were very disappointed. But later, we learned that he was brought in through the back door and was quietly taken out of the meeting when it was over. We were greatly excited and cheered up. The dreaded Kenyan ruler had to be smuggled in and out of such an important meeting, like a thief in the night, clearly illustrating the impact of our political interventions. After that, his visits to Britain became less frequent. Ngugi also served as our political teacher, conducting weekly classes on imperialism, colonialism, and new colonialism. Drawing on the resistance movement's experiences, we studied our histories, communities' struggle from the Turkana, Pokot, Kalenjin, the Luyas, the Luos, the Kikuyus, the Kambas, the Mijikenda, the Somalis, and the Oromos, and getting a deeper understanding of our liberation struggles. Ngugi led from the front, volunteering for even the smallest tasks, such as posting banners and posters during UK's harsh winter, often suffering from respiratory problems. His leadership and encouragement enabled me at a very young age to serve as the founding chair of Ukenya. And we connected with like-minded activists in Kenya, intensified our campaigns for freedom and democracy and justice, and exposed the regime's atrocities internationally through protests, speeches, and advocacy, increasingly isolating Moi and his regime. Under his remarkable political leadership and encouragement, I had the honor and the privilege of working with him throughout the period that he was in Britain. We connected with like-minded political activists in Kenya, and intensified campaigns for freedom, democracy, and justice in the UK, and systematically exposed what the Kenyan regime was doing to the Kenyan people to a wider audiences beyond our borders. Unbeknown to us at the time, our efforts played a significant role in shifting Kenya's political agenda. And there's no doubt Ngugi's speeches and activism and political efforts were pivotal in the regime's downfall. And Ngugi has contributed immensely to rolling back repression and expanding our democratic space. And truly, he is one of Kenya's unsung heroes of the second liberation. The repressive state's reaction to the launch of Ukenya was predictable. Its first move was to arrest my father, Hassan Abdi, then living in Garissa. They also ethnicized the movement, focusing on the Somali community, staging demonstrations where people were mobilized to denounce the organization and myself. I have colleagues now in parliament from Garissa and Wajir who, when they were students, were coerced by the state officials to burn effigies of me. One of Ngugi's major political achievements was the formation of the United Front of 7 Kenyan left-wing organizations across the UK, US, Canada, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Southern Africa in October 1986 in London. Key figures from the Kenyan left present at the conference included Professor Michere Mugo, Professor Shadrach Guto, Professor Maina wa Kinyati, and Professor Ngugi Wa Thiong'o himself. This gathering gave birth to Umoja under the leadership of the poet and activist Abdulatif Abdallah. After I left New York in 2006, following my appointment to co-lead IRIN, the United Nations Humanitarian News and Information Network based in Nairobi, I maintained regular contact with Ngugi. I had returned home permanently, but was deeply saddened that many comrades in exile, in our exile politics, remained abroad. In August 2004 was particularly a significant month. Ngugi, after 22 years in exile, returned to Kenyan soil to a tumultuous and hero's welcome. He came home after the fall of the Moi dictatorship to celebrate Kenya's democratic victory and to launch the Gikuyu edition of his book, Wizard of the Crow. Sadly, his triumphant homecoming was marred by a brutal attack on himself and his wife, Njeri, who was sexually assaulted on the 11th of August 2004. When I decided to run for the Kamukunji parliamentary seat in the 2011 by-election, Ngugi was very supportive, though deeply concerned that elements within the system might rig the election or even harm me. Despite significant obstacles, I was elected as an MP for Kamukunji on the 11th of August 2011, which is exactly 7 years after Ngugi and his wife had been attacked. Ngugi's concerns proved justified when I was violently attacked by assassins on the 7th of December 2012, sustaining serious injuries. The bomb blast just before the 2013 elections was evidently intended to eliminate me from the race. Ngugi closely followed my recovery and was delighted when, against all odds, I was re-elected by the people of Kamukunji in a landslide from a hospital bed on the 3rd of March 2013. I've always hoped Ngugi and other exiled comrades would return home so we could build a progressive movement that reflects the Kenyan people's desire for a free, democratic, and a just nation. I longed for him to visit Kamukunji, where I was now the MP. After several unsuccessful attempts, Ngugi finally visited on the 9th of June 2015. By then, I was in my second term and still recovering from the attack, walking on crutches. The event was held at Eastleigh High School, and brought together students from all secondary schools in Kamukunji. Indeed, it was a proud moment for the youth of the neighborhood to meet and engage with this legendary writer and revolutionary figure. Other guests included my colleague, the then MP from Vita, and now the governor of Mombasa, Abdul Sharif Nasser, the late Henry Chakava, Kenya's foremost publisher, Kiare Kamau, the CEO of the East African Educational Publishers, who is also the organizer of this event, the late Zarina Patel, the political activist Zahan Rajan, and the Deputy County Commissioner of Kamukunji then, and the current governor of Trans Nzoia, George Natembeya. Standing there in Kamukunji, with Ngugi back on Kenyan soil, I reflected on our long political journey, the highs and the lows, the pain of exile, and how we stood together to see the end of the repressive Kenyatta-Moi regimes. The atmosphere was charged with excitement, and I struggled to finish my introduction. When Ngugi took the stage, he was overcome with emotion, and he could not continue his speech. It was that moment in time I saw Mwalimu in tears for the first time, tears of joy. Only then did I truly understand how much this moment and Ngugi's return and solidarity meant to him. I stepped forward to embrace him. Hosting my political mentor and ideological comrade in Kamukunji was extraordinarily moving experience and the high point of my tenure as an MP. That moment would stay in my mind, it stay with me forever. To the young people and women of Kenya, and especially the Gen Z, you are the future and the vanguard of the Kenyan Revolution. You are the custodian of the Kenyan Revolution. Eschew negative ethnicity. Reject being used as pawns or cannon foders by reactionary forces. And embrace the idea of one united democratic Kenya. Ngugi articulated some of the society's hidden truths in his novel, Petals of Blood, stating, the truth is that our people are starved, not only of food, but of knowledge and dignity and honor. The only cure for hunger is food. The only cure for oppression is to fight back. Through his writings and speeches, Ngugi has led the foundation. It is now up to our youth to rise to Kenya's challenges and transform the nation. As Fran Fanon has said, each generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. Be the generation that fulfills its historic mission by engaging with Kenya's historic moment, and contributing to positive change. Don't wait. Don't agonize. Organize and act. Finally, life in exile was far from easy. We faced many challenges, living in a hostile environment under constant surveillance by the British intelligence and security. As you may have read in the recent archives coming out of Britain, both Ngugi and myself were followed very closely by the intelligence services of those countries. And the British High Commissioner wrote many letters under pressure from the Moi regime to force us out of Britain. Given the complex relationship between the UK government and the new colonial Kenyan state, we were constantly on the brink. The cost of living was high and affordable accommodation was scarce. Harsh winter weather affected our health, and some of our children suffered allergies and ailments that pressurized families to return home. When my second child was born in exile in London, Ngugi and the Ukenya members came in solidarity and supported us throughout, a practice we reciprocated for others. We stuck together as one Kenyan family, caring for one another amid the adversity. We were often comforted by Ngugi's poem. My Kikuyu mother used to tell me, he says, Gutirie utuku utakia. No night is so dark that it will not end in dawn. Or simply put, every night ends with dawn. Gutirie utuku utakia. This darkness too would pass. Ngugi was always there as mwalimu, the mentor and dependable comrade. His resilience and courage gave us boundless hope in our struggle for freedom, social change. Remarkably, while providing leadership, he showed no interest in titles, status, or material gain. He was always playing his role selflessly. Throughout his life, he remained upright, unbroken, and unwavering. For many of us, Ngugi was never absent from our lives. He was a constant present, writing, leading, mentoring, campaigning, encouraging, sharing, supporting, and inspiring. It is incredibly hard to accept that this giant of our times is no longer with us. It is even harder to say goodbye. Yet, I want to assure you, Comrade Ngugi, that your place in our hearts and in the history of our resistance is secure. Your writings, thoughts, deeds, and actions would continue to inspire millions of Kenyans and Africans. You would forever be remembered, revered. And celebrated as a hero of our nation. Thank you. And as a legendary son of Africa, let me assure you, the sacrifices you have made for us will not be in vain. History is on our side, and the tide is turning. One day, the radical vision you fought for a free, prosperous, and proud Kenya would come to pass. Go well, comrade. Aluta continua.
Let's give a round of applause to Honorable Hassan. Let's give him another round of applause. Thank you so much for hosting you here, and we look forward to seeing you again.